Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. If you were to sit by the shore and simply listen, not to the voices of people, not to the wind or the cry of gulls, but to the slow rhythm beneath it all, you might begin to hear the sea breathing. Not in quick, short gasps, but in long, full sighs, in and out. A pulse so slow, so steady it seems timeless. This breath is the tide. It is the gentle rise and fall of water, stretching itself along the edge of continents, pulled not by some engine within the earth, but by something far above, an invisible hand reaching from the sky. That hand is the moon, small, grey, distant. It seems quiet, like a stone in space, but its quietness hides a power. Not a power of noise or heat, but of pull. A tug so delicate it can lift entire oceans. It doesn't shout to be heard, it whispers through gravity. Gravity, that tender force, is not just a downward pull. It is a conversation between masses. Between the Earth and the Moon, there is always a dialogue. The Moon says, "Come closer," and the Earth listens, but cannot obey completely. Instead, its oceans move in reply, drawn forward and held back, swayed side to side. The Moon doesn't pull everything equally. It tugs most strongly at the water nearest to it, creating a bulge, a swelling in the ocean. At the same time, the Earth itself, solid and strong, is pulled slightly toward the Moon, leaving behind another bulge on the opposite side. So there are always two high tides, chasing the Moon around the globe like slow dancers. Now imagine you are deep below the water's surface, not where waves crash and light sparkles, but far down, where the pressure is great and the silence is thicker. Even here the Moon's pull is felt. The entire column of water stretches upward, responding not with a splash, but with a subtle lean. Water moves in grand loops called tidal currents, shifting entire layers of the ocean as the Earth turns. It is not a stormy movement, it is a quiet flow, the kind that continues whether we notice or not. Long ago people began to see patterns in these movements. Fishermen knew that fish would come and go with the tides. Sailors watched the Moon before setting off, knowing that harbours and shores change shape depending on its place in the sky. Even today we build our bridges and ports with the Moon in mind, respecting its regular tug on the water. But there is more to this pull than we can see. As the Moon drifts slowly away from Earth, about 4 centimetres a year, it steals a tiny bit of our planet's energy. This slow departure makes Earth's spin more sluggish. Long ago, a day was shorter. Now it stretches longer, minute by minute, century by century. So every high tide, every rising wave, is not just a moon-pulled rhythm, it is a slowing heartbeat of our world. Let's drift a little deeper. Picture the Moon high above the ocean at night. Its light lays a silver path across the water, and beneath that light the ocean bulges ever so slightly toward it. The water closest to the Moon is being drawn ahead, and even though the water resists, held by Earth's gravity, it moves just a little. This movement stretches across the globe, following the Moon's slow orbit. But the Earth spins faster than the Moon moves, and this mismatch causes the tidal bulge to tilt slightly ahead of the Moon. This forward lean creates a tension between the Earth and the Moon, like a game of tug-of-war where both players are drifting apart. Because the ocean doesn't move instantly, it has mass, resistance, depth. The tides are not perfectly timed with the Moon's position. There's a delay, a lag, a kind of memory in the water. The ocean remembers where the Moon was, even as it chases where the Moon is going. That memory is part of what gives the tide its lullaby rhythm, a rocking not just from space but from time. This delay has consequences. It pulls the Moon forward in its orbit, giving it energy, allowing it to drift away from Earth over time. In return, Earth spins more slowly, letting its days lengthen. This is a kind of cosmic trade, a partnership between rock and liquid, between stillness and motion, where both bodies change just a little with every passing wave. We often think of the Moon as motionless, but it is not. It orbits with elegance, kept in line by Earth's gravity, just as it exerts its own, And within this exchange, the oceans dance. They don't just rise and fall, they sway, they rotate, they whisper across the seafloor. In some places, tides are tiny. In others, they tower meters high. It depends on the coastline, the sea depth, the underwater landscape. The moon's pull is the same, but Earth's shape gives it different voices. Some places hear a soft sigh of water. Others feel a rushing tide. But all of them are part of the same music. And just as the ocean lifts its voice to the sky, so too do the shores respond. Beaches grow and shrink, sand shifts. Animals adapt their lives to the rhythm. Crabs dig tunnels that flood and dry with perfect timing. Birds feed where the water pulls back. Corals grow in places touched by just the right amount of wave. The moon's pull becomes the schedule of life. And so, as we lie by the sea and feel its rhythm, we are also feeling the moon's touch. Not a touch we can see or hear, but one we can sense in the sway of the water and the passage of time. A touch that reminds us that we are part of a larger dance, a slow, beautiful, invisible waltz between water and sky. The moon does not shine with its own light, yet it glows gently, borrowing the sun's brilliance and giving it back to us in soft silver. Its face is always turned toward us, locked in a quiet gaze, as if watching over the world's tides like a caretaker of time. As it floats above the earth, its pull continues, not just across the sea's surface, but deep within the water, in layers that remember its touch. This memory carries the tide forward, and through it the ocean speaks. It speaks not in words, but in patterns, in gentle loops and currents that curl around islands and slip through channels. These flows do not rush, they drift, they bend and yield, always answering gravity's call with grace. Underwater, the creatures of the sea are listeners in this grand lullaby. The smallest plankton, glowing with bioluminescence, rise and fall with the tides, carried like dreams between waking and rest. Shoals of fish follow invisible currents shaped by the moon's quiet orders. Even the massive whales, with their long, mournful songs, travel paths influenced by these steady pulses of the sea. There is order in the movement, a rhythm that stretches across time zones and continents. The oceans do not move alone, they move together, as if the whole planet inhales and exhales in one breath. But what truly shapes the tide's song is not only the moon. The sun, too, has a role. Though it is far larger, its distance makes its pull gentler. Still, when the sun and moon align during new and full moons, their gravity joins hands and the tides grow stronger. These are called spring tides, not because of the season, but because the water springs forward. In contrast, when the sun and moon form a right angle in the sky, their pulls interfere slightly, making the tides gentler. These are neap tides, and so even the shape of the tide is a conversation, a harmony or a gentle disagreement between light and shadow. If you were to draw the tide, it would not be a simple wave. It would be a slow swelling, a long slope that rises and falls over hours. And inside that rise, countless drops of water move together, each part of something larger than itself. This is how gravity works, not with sudden motion, but with unity. It pulls not just on single things, but on everything at once. And because of that, the tide is never chaotic. It is graceful. Even when storms whip the surface and winds howl above, the tide still moves below with patience, as if whispering, "This too shall pass." The seafloor feels this pull. It is not just water that responds. The Earth's crust, too, bends ever so slightly with the moon's tug. These are called earth tides, and though we cannot feel them beneath our feet, they exist. The solid Earth flexes and relaxes, a movement smaller than the oceans, but still there, still part of the moon's silent work. Tides also shape the land over long spans of time. They wear away rocks, carve out inlets, and build up new shores with grains of sand. Each wave that rushes in, each wave that falls away, carries a piece of the story. And so the moon does not just pull water, it helps sculpt the face of the world. It smooths the rough edges of the coast, shifts islands, and creates spaces where life can thrive in the gentle meeting of land and sea. People once believed that the moon controlled more than just tides. They watched its phases to guide planting and harvesting. They connected it to sleep and dreams, to emotions and memory. Some of these ideas were stories, myths wrapped around mystery. but some were born of careful observation. For example, many sea creatures lay their eggs by the timing of the tide, knowing their young will be carried out safely or protected in shallow pools. Coral reefs often spawn in mass during specific lunar phases, releasing clouds of life into the current. The moon becomes a clock for life, keeping time in a language written in salt and motion. Even now we are learning. Satellites measure the height of the sea and computers model the tides with precision. But the feeling of the tide cannot be captured in data alone. You must stand by the sea and feel it. Let the cool water touch your ankles, watch the wet sand gleam, and listen to the hush of retreating waves. That is where the tide lives, not only in equations but in the heart. In quiet coves and busy harbours, the tide is steady. Ships rise and fall, docks stretch and lean. And beneath them, barnacles, mussels, and tiny clinging lives wait patiently for water's return. They are not anxious. They know it will come. The moon always keeps its promise. So the tide is not just a movement of water. It is a promise kept, a pattern honoured. It is a kind of trust between the earth and its only natural satellite. And we, living on this spinning blue sphere, are cradled within that trust. Each day, whether we notice or not, the ocean remembers the moon, and the moon in turn keeps time with us. Now imagine again the moon above the sea. Imagine it not as a distant stone, but as a guardian of rhythm. Imagine the tide as a message, written in liquid and gravity, in patience and pull. It is a song that has played for billions of years. It will play long after we are gone, and yet it speaks to us now as clearly as a lullaby sung to a child. We are part of that lullaby. Our bodies contain salt from the ocean. Our cells swim in liquid shaped by ancient seas. The rhythms of our hearts, the cycle of our breath, the slow wave of sleep, these too echo the tides. The moon pulls at us not just from without, but from within. Its invisible hand reaches not only into the water, but into our dreams. That is why when the tide comes in, something in us feels full, and when it goes out, something feels quiet. This rhythm is not learned. It is remembered. It is ancient. It is shared. And so the tide goes on and we go with it, swayed gently by the moon's silent music. If you ever find yourself by the sea during the quiet hours of the night, you might notice something almost unspoken, a softness in the air, a rhythm too slow for counting. The tide, though invisible in the moment, is moving, always moving. Its presence is felt more than seen, like a thought drifting gently through the mind. And while we often measure it in hours or centimetres, the truth is more poetic. The tide is time written in water, a clock with no hands, a lullaby played across the planet's edge. Its slow advance and retreat are not just signs of gravity's work, they are the heartbeat of our world's memory. Long before we had machines to track the tide or names for the phases of the moon, people lived by this rhythm. They felt it in the sand under their feet, in the way driftwood lined the shore, in the scent of salt rising as the water returned. The tide told them when to gather, when to plant, when to wait. It marked time with waves instead of numbers. It taught patience, and even now, in a world full of clocks and schedules, that lesson remains. The tide doesn't rush, it doesn't stop, it simply arrives, always on time, yet never in a hurry. This constancy is what makes the tide so powerful, not just in force but in meaning. It reminds us that some things in the universe are steady, that even as the moon slips farther away, even as continents drift and climates shift, the ocean will continue to breathe, in and out, rise and fall, each movement a quiet reply to the moon's pull, and each return a promise that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. Now let's drift once more into the sea's quiet language. Far beneath the surface, where sunlight fades and the world turns blue, the tide becomes a gentle pressure, not a wave you can see, but a shift you can feel. Here, animals adapt to the changes without resistance. They ride the currents, time their journeys, and listen. There is no struggle, only alignment. The ocean does not fight the moon, it follows, it yields, and in doing so it moves mountains of water with grace. The land above also listens. Salt marshes flood and drain, creating nurseries for life. Estuarine skies breathe with each cycle, their waters rich with nutrients carried by the tide. Even trees by the shore learn this rhythm. Mangroves grow roots that can hold fast during high water, and still breathe when the tide slips away. These places are alive, not despite the tide, but because of it. They are shaped by its persistence, its predictability, its quiet strength. In this way, the tide is not just a force, it is a teacher. It shows us how to move through life with patience and how to return after each retreat, how to flow around what we cannot change. It tells us that power does not always look like noise or speed. Sometimes it is the gentle rising of the sea again and again without pause. There's poetry in how the tide touches everything, from the edge of continents to the skin of fish, from the flight paths of birds to the sleep cycles of coastal people. Its influence is soft but wide like moonlight over water. You cannot hold it in your hand, but you can stand inside it. You can be wrapped in its rhythm, and once you've felt it, truly felt it, you carry it with you, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in your dreams. And at nights, when the moon is full and the sea glows like polished silver, it feels as if the entire planet is humming a song without words, but filled with meaning, a melody written not by any composer, but by time and gravity and distance. The tide is that melody, slow, repeating, evolving, and endless. Scientists will tell you that the tide can be calculated, that it follows rules, equations, models, and they are right. But what can't be measured is how it feels, the comfort it brings, the way it makes the world seem steady even when everything else feels uncertain. The tide is a constant companion. It tells us in its own way, I am still here, I will return. That sense of return, that cycle, is one of the oldest ideas in nature. Everything moves in loops, the moon around Earth, Earth around the sun, water through the clouds, the rivers, the sea. The tide is a reminder that endings are often beginnings, that every withdrawal is followed by a return, that nothing is lost forever. And perhaps, in our own lives, this is the tide's most gentle gift. It teaches us not to fear the ebbing, not to mourn what is drifting away, because the tide always returns, not the same drop of water, not the same shape of wave, but the rhythm remains, the pull remains, the song remains. And so, as the moon keeps its watch and the earth spins slowly on, the ocean will keep rising and falling, the tide will keep whispering its lullaby, and we, if we are quiet enough, might still hear it, in the hush between thoughts, in the pause before sleep, in the space where the sea meets the sky and everything feels still. There, in that stillness, the tide continues, soft, steady, sure, a lullaby of gravity, time and water, playing endlessly at the edge of the world. If you could sink quietly beneath the waves, beneath the white foam and the moving blue, down where the sunlight fades into silence, you would find a world in motion. It doesn't shout, it doesn't roar, but it moves with purpose. This world is the ocean's deep, where water listens more than it speaks, where pressure is great and light is rare, but gravity still sings. Down here, gravity is not a pulling force that drags things down, it is a sculptor, shaping the sea in soft, slow curves. It guides water into paths that stretch across oceans and into layers that never mix. The ocean, vast and deep, is not still. It responds to gravity with the quiet discipline of a dancer who never stops moving, even when no one is watching. The deep sea is not flat. It is shaped by folds and trenches, by underwater mountains and ridges, all held in place by gravity's patient hand. These shapes control how water flows. Gravity pulls the surface downward toward the center of the Earth, but beneath that surface, gravity also keeps the ocean's weight pressed tightly upon itself. As water descends, it grows colder, heavier, denser. The deeper you go, the more tightly gravity hugs each drop. In some places, the sea is over 10 kilometers deep, and yet even in those black depths, gravity guides every current. No matter how far the water falls, it never escapes that silent pull. At the surface, we see waves and tides, caused by winds and the moon's pull. But deep below, another movement takes place. Thermohaline circulation, a slow and steady river within the ocean itself. Driven by gravity, salt and temperature, this flow acts like the ocean's bloodstream. Cold, salty water near the poles sinks and slides along the ocean floor, travelling for thousands of miles before it rises again. It is called the global conveyor belt. It moves so slowly you could walk faster, but it never stops. It's not wind that pushes it. It's not light. It is the weight of salt and cold sinking and flowing in obedience to gravity. This quiet current helps balance the world's temperature. It feeds the sea with oxygen. It connects distant coasts. And it does all of this in the dark, in silence. Imagine standing on the floor of the deep ocean. It is not flat. It is full of ridges, tall as mountains, and trenches deeper than Everest is high. Gravity presses down from above, shaping every slope and valley. Water moves differently here. It flows along these paths like fog over hills, bending and folding in silence. And as it flows, it listens. It listens to the shape of the seafloor, to the density of the water beside it, to the tug of gravity pulling it ever so gently downhill. This is not the chaos of surface storms. This is structure, order. Gravity writing its story in the sea. Even animals of the deep have learned to follow gravity's script. Some float just above the ocean floor, balancing between sinking and rising, listening for the current's cue. Others live in places where the slope of the land directs water to bring nutrients from faraway places. These creatures never see the moon or feel the wind, but they still live by the gravity-shaped patterns of the deep. They follow its flow, feed on its gifts, and rest in the pockets it has carved out over eons. Farther up, but still deep, layers of water form barriers that do not mix easily. A warmer layer may float above a colder one, creating a gentle but persistent line where gravity has sorted the sea by weight. Scientists call these pycnoclines a kind of underwater horizon. Even though there are no fences in the sea, gravity builds invisible walls by organizing water through temperature and salt. These walls shape where animals swim, where nutrients travel, where heat escapes. We often think of gravity as something we feel pulling us downward, but in the ocean, gravity works in every direction. It shapes pressure, it defines layers, it sculpts how water falls and rises, even when we cannot see it. If you drop a stone into the sea, gravity does not just pull it straight down. The stone moves through layers, through temperatures, through water of different weights. Its journey is shaped by all of that. In the same way, a drop of cold, salty water in the Arctic may sink and not rise again for 1,000 years. That single drop will travel beneath continents, through underwater valleys, around volcanic ridges, all because gravity told it to follow the slope. The weight of the ocean is immense. It presses on the seafloor with unimaginable force. And yet, the water above is gentle. It flows in waves and ripples, barely touching our feet. But beneath, the weight is always there, silent, heavy, balanced. And this balance is held together by gravity's quiet command. Without it, the ocean would be chaos. Without it, water would pile in strange places or drift into the sky. But with gravity, there is harmony. A whispering order beneath the blue. And so, when we speak of the sea, we must also speak of gravity, not just as a force that pulls, but as a force that listens, that waits, that guides without shouting. It is the reason the sea has shape, the reason the sea has flow, the reason the sea remembers where it's been and where it must go. Gravity does not demand, it invites, it suggests, and the ocean in turn listens carefully. So the next time you look out at the water, remember that what you see is only a fraction of the story. Beneath the shimmer, beneath the surface, gravity is at work, composing a song of pressure and pull, and the sea in its vast silence is always listening. Beneath the surface, where sunlight no longer dances and colour disappears into blue and black, the ocean remains awake. It is not still, though it may seem so. It is alive with motion, a quiet ballet of particles and pressure, of warmth slipping into cold, of weight meeting form. And through all of this, gravity does not shout, but it governs. It lays down the invisible rules, and the water follows. The ocean listens with every drop, adjusting itself to the balance gravity asks it to hold. That balance is fragile yet constant. A current too slow for the eye, a slope too gentle to see, a pull too quiet to hear. But it is there, shaping the architecture of the sea's hidden world. In the deep ocean, gravity arranges the water in layers. Each layer rests upon the one beneath, stacked like gentle shadows. Warm water, being lighter, floats atop the colder depths. Saltier water, being denser, sinks. The result is a silent architecture of invisible walls, boundaries where water resists mixing, where sound slows, and where nutrients collect like forgotten whispers. These boundaries do not move quickly, but they matter. They decide where life will bloom, where it will wait, and where it must move, all of it shaped by the gravity that holds every molecule in its quiet embrace. This deep structure of the sea is not always calm. Sometimes large waves form not at the surface, but between layers of water. These are internal waves, massive, slow-moving ridges of motion hidden deep beneath the surface. Some stretch for hundreds of kilometers. You could sail across one and never know it was there. But if you could see through the water, you would find mountains rising and falling in slow procession, shaped not by wind or light, but by density and pull. These waves carry energy across oceans. They mix nutrients between layers. They move slowly, but with purpose. They are gravity's subtle voice, flowing not above, but within. These internal waves are not alone. There are underwater currents, some colder than ice, some heavier with salt that creep across the ocean floor. They slip between ridges and follow trenches, moving like fog through a canyon. They do not roar or rush. They do not shimmer. But they shape the sea as surely as rivers shape the land. These movements transport life, stir chemicals, and feed the deep. They also help cool the earth, as cold water absorbs heat and carries it far from the surface. Without them, our planet would warm too fast and the seas would stagnate. Gravity ensures the deep keeps turning, keeps breathing in its own slow way. Even the ocean floor is not beyond gravity's reach. The weight of water above presses constantly on the crust below. In some places, that pressure is enough to cause cracks in the seafloor to open, vents where hot minerals rise like breath from the Earth's lungs. These hydrothermal vents create entire ecosystems in the dark. Life gathers in the warmth and feeds on chemicals carried upward. And all of this begins with gravity, the downward press of oceans thick with memory, heavy with salt, resting on rock until the rock responds. In the stillness of the deep, creatures have adapted to this constant pressure. Some have no eyes because light never reaches them. Others glow softly, carrying their own light like lanterns in the dark. They move slowly, conserving energy, their bodies shaped to live where the weight of water would crush anything unprepared. And yet they thrive. They swim with the currents shaped by density and temperature, gliding through layers gravity has arranged. Their entire world is defined by how gravity has organized the sea around them. The balance between fresh water and salt also carries weight. When glaciers melt and rain falls into the sea, they create patches of lighter water. These patches resist mixing with the saltier sea. They float atop, warm and light, until gravity gradually blends them downward. This mixing can take years, decades, even centuries. It is not forced. It is not fast. It is a negotiation. Gravity invites the layers to settle, and the ocean listens patiently. The process ensures that the sea remains in balance, not just in temperature, but in life. Tsunamis, though rare and dramatic, are also part of this conversation. Caused by underwater earthquakes or landslides, they are waves of gravity, displaced water rushing to regain balance. When the seafloor shifts suddenly, it changes the water's shape. Gravity notices the change, and the ocean rushes to correct it, not with chaos, but with force. The result is a wave that travels vast distances, often unnoticed in deep waters, but gaining strength as it reaches the shallows. Here again, gravity does not cause the quake, but it tells the water what to do in response. We live on a planet of water. More than 2/3 of Earth is covered in ocean, and most of that ocean is hidden from view. The surface is what we see, what we swim in, what we sail, but the depths, those endless shadowed places, are where gravity tells its slowest, strongest stories. These stories are not written in ink or etched in stone. They are felt. They are carried in currents that began before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. And above it all, gravity keeps watch. It does not rest. It does not forget. It continues to guide the water along its ancient paths. It does not control with harsh commands, but with quiet consistency. It is the reason a cold current can cross an ocean without stopping. It is the reason water knows where to go, how fast to sink, how gently to rise. It is the reason the deep listens, and listens so well. To feel this is to understand something ancient, that beneath everything we see there is movement, that even in sequence there is structure, that the world's deepest places are not beyond understanding, they are simply slow in speaking, and when they do, they speak in the language of gravity, and water listens with perfect stillness. In the deep hours of the ocean's life, when no light pierces the weight of water and no sound carries far, the sea still stirs. It moves not with urgency, but with certainty. a certainty born from the pull of gravity, steady and unchanging. This is not a force that commands. It does not crash or scream. It persuades. It leans gently. It guides the ocean to flow from higher to lower, from lighter to heavier, from warm to cold. And in that guidance a world unfolds, a world not built in a day, but shaped across eons. There are places on the ocean floor where water has gathered in hidden lakes, pools of salt so heavy they do not mix with the sea around them. These brine pools sit in hollows, denser than the ocean above, pressed into place by gravity. They ripple gently inside themselves, like miniature seas within the sea. Fish that wander too deep into these layers sometimes cannot return. The weight of salt is too great. These pools are not violent, but they are final. They are reminders that gravity does not only pull downward, it separates, it defines, it sets the boundaries of what can exist where. Elsewhere in the deep, canyons stretch farther than any trench on land, carved not by human hands but by gravity's slow request for balance. Sediments slide down their slopes, currents whisper along their walls, and life settles into these quiet hollows where the world above forgets to look. Here, small creatures dig into the soft mud. Larger ones drift above, their shapes honed by darkness. They are not lost, they are exactly where gravity allows them to be. The deep has no roads, no signs, but the water knows its path. It always moves with purpose, following slopes too slow for the eye to notice. Gravity's presence in the sea is most often revealed through pressure. The deeper you go, the more it builds. A single square inch of deep-sea floor may feel the weight of thousands of tons of water. And yet life endures there, not crushed, but adapted. Some animals have flexible bodies that do not resist the weight. Others carry dense oils that help them float just enough. They do not fight the pressure. They live with it. They move slowly, gracefully, with the patience that comes from knowing the world moves on its own time. It is not only life that follows gravity. The chemistry of the sea obeys too. Nutrients sink to deeper layers carried by dead plankton and drifting particles. These sinking flecks are called marine snow. They fall like ash, slowly, constantly, feeding the world below. The deep survives on this soft rain of memory, fragments from the sunlit surface pulled downward by gravity's invitation. In turn, the creatures of the deep recycle these bits, turning them into energy, into life, into motion. And when they die, they fall as well, adding their own story to the snow. The sea writes its history in slow descent. Even the shape of the ocean's surface is influenced by the world below. Where underwater mountains rise, the sea's surface may bulge ever so slightly. Where trenches fall away, the water dips. Satellites from space can see these tiny changes, proof that gravity does not only act beneath, but pulls upward too. The ocean does not lie flat. It swells and curves, shaped by the mass beneath it. It is held in place not just by the moon, but by the earth itself, in all its uneven weight. The sea listens to that weight, settling where it must, moving when invited. For all its mystery, the ocean is never truly unpredictable. It may surprise us with its beauty or depth, but it always follows rules. Not human rules, not the laws we write on paper, but the rules gravity has written into the planet's very bones. The water may rise and fall, it may swirl and slip away, but it never escapes those rules. And because of that, the sea becomes something we can know, if not in whole, then in part. We can trace its currents, we can map its layers, we can understand little by little the language it speaks. And yet even with knowledge, the wonder remains. To know that the water beneath us listens to gravity does not make it less beautiful. It makes it more so. It means that every wave, every current, every slow drift of cold across the ocean floor is part of a deeper harmony. A quiet music played not in notes but in movement, not in time but in timelessness. Imagine floating far above the earth, watching the sea curve gently around the planet's shape. Imagine seeing its currents slip beneath clouds, its tides rise toward the moon. From that distance the ocean appears calm, but within the dance continues, slow, sure, eternal. Gravity holds the sea as a hand holds a bowl, not tightly, not harshly, but with care, and the sea in turn fills that space with a movement and life. This is what it means to say the ocean listens. Not that it hears in sound, but that it responds with grace. It remembers the moon, it remembers the heat of the sun, the salt of rivers, the stories told in sediment. And through it all, gravity keeps the conversation steady. It ensures that the ocean does not forget where to flow, where to settle, where to rise again. And we, as beings made of water, we listen too. We may not live in the deep, but we carry its rhythm. In our blood, our breath, our bones, we respond to the same quiet pull. The same gravity that shapes the sea shapes us. We rise and fall, we ebb and flow, we dream in patterns as ancient as tide and current. So let the surface shimmer, let the waves crash and curl. But remember the silence beneath, the deep where gravity speaks and the sea listens. A place of quiet truth, a place where time moves slowly, a place where the earth and water hold each other close and nothing is ever truly still, but everything belongs. There are moments by the sea when the world feels quieter, softer, as though it is listening. Not to people, not to noise, but to something higher. In those moments, if you stand still, you might feel it too. The sea is not alone. It is speaking, not in words or sounds, but in its movement. The tide that creeps up the shore and falls away again is not just a response to the moon's pull. It is part of a conversation between ocean and sky, between water and wind, between earth and the heavens. And while the moon is the most patient speaker, the sun, the air, and even the clouds have a voice in this quiet dialogue. Each day as the sun rises and the air warms, the sea responds. Heat slips across the surface, making water molecules dance a little faster, making some of them rise into the air and become invisible. This is evaporation, the sky borrowing water from the ocean. The ocean doesn't resist. It offers itself up, knowing that what rises will one day return. The sea never holds too tightly. It trusts the cycle, and in this exchange a pattern forms. Clouds gather, winds change, rain returns, all of it shaped by heat and gravity, by the sky's breath and the sea's reply. The tide, too, is shaped by this connection. We often say the moon pulls the water toward it, but it's more than that. The earth is spinning, the moon is circling, and the sun is casting its own gravity. Together they weave a pattern that plays out across coastlines. Twice each day the tide comes in, twice it flows away. But this isn't just physics, it's poetry. The ocean stretches itself toward the moon, toward the sun, and sometimes in both directions at once. When the moon and sun align, their combined pull creates stronger tides. Spring tides when the water reaches farther than usual, and when they are at odds, pulling from different angles. The sea responds with gentler movements, neap tides, smaller and more restrained. This is the sea listening, adjusting, whispering back. Above the surface, the wind adds its own rhythm. As it blows across the sea, it shapes waves, sends spray into the air, and carries whispers of salt and cool across the land. But below the surface, the ocean remembers more than the moment. It remembers the pull of the moon, the push of the wind, the warmth of the sun, and it responds with grace. The tide does not crash because of the moon. It lifts. It doesn't roar because of the sun. It swells. The sea listens deeply. And in doing so, it moves slowly, evenly, in patterns older than memory. Even the shape of the earth matters in this conversation. The way a bay curves or a cliff juts into the water can change how the tide flows. Some places see only a slight shift. Others see water rise like a wall, rushing in with strength. The sea molds itself to the land, not because it must, but because it can. It follows gravity, yes, but it also follows space, form, and shape. This is not mindless movement. It is a careful response to every voice the sky sends down, every pull of the moon, every nudge from the sun, every kiss of the wind. High above, the atmosphere stirs, pressure changes, storms roll in, and still the ocean listens. When air presses down, the sea sinks ever so slightly. When it lifts, the sea rises in kind. These are not violent gestures. They are subtle, gentle. The sea does not resist the sky. It bends to meet it. In hurricanes, this balance becomes extreme. Wind and pressure combine to raise the sea high onto the land. But even in those wild moments, the tide remains a part of the conversation. It doesn't disappear, it waits. When the storm passes, it returns to its steady rhythm, like a voice resuming after a loud interruption. Even in the silence of night, the ocean speaks. The moonlight shines across the surface, silver and slow, and beneath that light, the sea swells quietly. It rises not only because the moon demands it, but because the sea is listening. It feels the moon's position, its gravity, its pull. And even though the earth spins, the ocean stays connected. This connection is not broken by distance. It is held together by gravity, by memory, by time itself. The tides also carry something deeper. Rhythm. Not just of water, but of life. Creatures along the shore live by this timing. Shellfish open when the water returns. Birds feed when the sand is exposed. Tiny crabs dart from hole to hole following a clock that no human built. These creatures do not guess. They know. The tide tells them everything they need to understand, and they listen, generation after generation, adapting to a rhythm that is both delicate and dependable. In this way, the tide becomes more than a movement. It becomes language. A way for the earth to speak to its water. A way for the sky to ask, and for the sea to answer. And though we use numbers to predict when the tide will rise, we cannot measure the meaning it carries. We cannot chart how it feels to watch the sea lift itself in silence, or how it falls away like a long breath, finally exhaled. And so the conversation continues. The ocean, listening. The sky, speaking. The moon, pulling. The wind, stirring. And somewhere in the middle the tide rises and falls, not because it must, but because it chooses to respond. It is not only gravity at work, it is grace, it is trust, it is the soft whisper of the world keeping time. In the hush between waves, there is a rhythm that can't be heard but can be felt. The sea doesn't simply respond to what's above, it waits for it, predicts it, absorbs it. The tide is not just the moon's dance partner, it is the sky's patient listener. When the wind brushes the water's surface, the sea doesn't flinch. It flows. It molds its surface into peaks and valleys, into patterns of calm and storm. But beneath that restless skin, deeper layers remain almost still, echoing only the slow pull of gravity. And when clouds gather, thick with rain and dark with energy, the ocean is ready, not to fight but to receive. Rain, though born in the sky, returns to the sea like a forgotten memory. Every drop that falls is part of a loop older than history, lifted by sunlight, guided by air, and finally let go. The ocean doesn't ask questions when the sky returns its borrowed water. It accepts it with quiet familiarity. Sometimes the surface cools, sometimes the salinity changes, but always the sea absorbs and adapts. Even heavy rains crashing down in bursts cannot break the ocean's conversation. They only add to it, each drop a word, each splash a syllable. And the sea listens, spreading the message across its surface, down through its layers, until the rain becomes part of the whole again. Wind too carries messages from far away. It may begin as a whisper in a desert or a gust through mountain passes, but once it touches the ocean, it becomes part of the story. Some winds are soft and warm, gently curling waves like lazy brushstrokes. Others howl with force, piling water against shorelines and sculpting dunes from grains of salt. Yet even in storms, the ocean remembers the moon. Even when the surface boils with motion, the tide continues, unaffected in its timing, undisturbed in its rhythm. It is as if the tide listens to a deeper voice, one that wind and storm cannot interrupt. In tropical seas, where sunlight is strongest and clouds often burst into downpours, the tide still finds its way. Shallow bays warm quickly, creating thermal layers. These warmer waters rise slightly, pushed upward by the energy of the sun, and yet gravity remains the balancing hand, reminding the water of its place. The tide doesn't argue with heat or light, it simply adjusts, carrying warm water here, drawing cooler water there, always responding without resistance. And in this way, the ocean becomes a giant mirror, not only reflecting the sky above, but embodying it. The sea holds the sky's warmth, its mood, its storms, and its peace, all at once. There are places where air pressure shapes the sea in ways almost invisible. When high-pressure systems hover over the ocean, they press the surface down just slightly. When low-pressure systems pass by, the sea rises in reply. These changes can be subtle, measured in centimeters, but the ocean always responds, it always adjusts. It knows the weight of the sky, and it reshapes itself to bear it. This is not submission, it is relationship. A balancing act so refined, so continuous that we rarely notice the grace behind it. Even in stillness, the ocean is never disconnected from the sky. On cloudless nights, when stars reflect off the water and the moon hangs low, the tide listens most closely. It leans toward the moon not with urgency but with faith. The moon does not pull like a rope, it tugs like a memory. The sea lifts in answer, reaching not only upward, but outward, toward beaches, rocks, and mangroves. It kisses the edges of the land and then retreats, leaving behind smooth lines, salt and silence. This rhythm, advance and return, is repeated across the world, in every time zone, in every language. The sea speaks it fluently, always on time, always with grace, and the sky for its part changes constantly. Clouds shift, winds rise, storms form and dissipate. But the ocean offers consistency. It is the anchor in the conversation, the one who remembers. Even when the sky forgets its own calm and bursts into rain or thunder, the ocean remains a listener. It may grow restless for a while, but it always returns to stillness. It always returns to the moon's schedule. Because the sea is not only moved by the sky, it is grounded by something deeper. Gravity, patience, memory. Along the coasts, this balance becomes visible. In tidal flats, where water slips in and out like breath, the sea leaves behind reflections of the sky, ripples that mirror clouds, puddles that shimmer with twilight. In marshes and mangroves, water rises to meet birds and plants that time their lives to the tide. And above them, the sky watches, sending down warmth or shadow, light or wind, but never breaking the rhythm. These places become quiet theatres, where sky and sea exchange lines in an eternal play. In polar regions, the story shifts. Ice forms across the ocean's skin, thick and white, reshaping how the sea touches the air. But even here, the tide moves beneath the ice. It lifts the frozen sheet just a little, then lets it fall. Cracks form in time with lunar cycles. The sky sends down cold and the sea accepts it, adjusting its flow, slowing its surface. The tide becomes quieter here, but it does not stop. It never stops. It moves below, carrying salt and memory, whispering along the ocean floor where no eye can see. And so, in every climate, in every condition, the ocean listens. It listens not just to the moon, but to the full voice of the sky. It hears the wind, the warmth, the pressure, the light. And in return, it speaks with tides, not loud, not fast, but with perfect reliability. It reminds us that true power does not need to shout, that true conversation happens in both silence and motion, that the world is not made of parts but of relationships. And among the oldest of these is the bond between sea and sky. As morning slips quietly into the world, the sea already knows. Before the first golden light touches the water, before the birds begin to stir and the wind awakens, the tide has already begun its slow movement. It isn't rushed by the coming day. It isn't waiting for the world to notice. It simply continues, following a rhythm that has never faltered. This is the final whisper in the conversation between ocean and sky, a lullaby that never ends. And though we measure it with charts and clocks, the truth of it lives deeper, in something softer, older, and unspoken. The tide comes in with a kind of grace, washing over stones and sand, curling around driftwood, lifting seaweed in its path. It fills the crevices in rocks, smooths the lines left by the night before, and makes everything new again. Each wave, though small, carries the weight of gravity and memory, of lunar pull and solar permission. It carries the shape of the coastline, the breath of the wind, the warmth of the day. No part of the sea moves alone. Everything is connected. Even in silence. When the tide retreats, it does not withdraw in sadness. It leaves with the same peace it arrived with. It uncovers what was hidden, not to expose but to reveal. Small creatures emerge from the sand. Shells glitter with sunlight. Pools form in the rocks, filled with tiny universes of life. These are the places where sky and sea leave their secrets. Here, in the stillness left behind by the retreating tide, we find the gentle remains of a conversation that continues just beyond our hearing. Children play in the wet sand, unaware they are walking through a message written by the moon. Fishermen read the tide like a familiar book. Sailors wait for its rise before setting out. And poets, standing at the edge of the world, try to put into words the feeling of being near something so vast, so ancient, and yet so responsive. The tide doesn't only shape the water, it shapes us. It teaches us about timing, about trust, about letting go and returning again. It tells us we are not outside the world's rhythm, we are part of it. And above it all, the sky watches. It doesn't demand or dictate, it simply changes. Clouds drift, light shifts, the air warms and cools. But through every change, the ocean stays in conversation. It never ignores the sky. Even the smallest gust of wind is acknowledged. Even the faintest shimmer of heat finds its way into the sea's reply. This responsiveness is not weakness, it is wisdom. The ocean knows that to endure it must listen, it must adapt, and it must remember. High tide is not an end, low tide is not a loss. They are both part of the same promise: the sea will return. It always does. No matter the weather, no matter the storm, the tide finds its way. It does not race, it does not panic. It follows a deeper certainty, one that echoes through the water and into the bones of the earth. This is why standing by the sea can bring peace. It reminds us that there is something in the world that cannot be rushed, something that moves with purpose no matter what else may be happening. And so the day continues. The sky sends down warmth and wind, shadows and light. The sea responds in ripples and tides, in waves and swells. This conversation, ancient and ongoing, never breaks. It has no beginning and no final word. It simply continues, like breath, like heartbeat, like sleep. At dusk, the tide shifts again. The moon begins its quiet pull and the water lifts once more. Night settles over the world, but the tide keeps speaking. Even in darkness, the ocean listens. There are places where the sea seems to hum, not with sound, but with presence. These are the moments when the tide is between, neither high nor low, but balanced. This pause is short, almost unnoticeable, yet deeply meaningful. It is the breath between lines in the poem, the silence before a whisper. In this moment, sky and sea are perfectly still in their exchange, each waiting for the other to speak. And then, softly, the water begins to move again. The moon, ever patient, continues its path. The earth turns, the sun dips below the horizon, and the tide moves with all of it, not as a servant, but as a partner, a participant in the cosmic rhythm. It lifts, it falls, it shapes the land, feeds the life, cools the air, and connects everything it touches. And in this great orchestration there is no need for noise, there is only the tide, faithful, responsive, eternal. So if you find yourself by the ocean and all is quiet, listen more deeply, let your heart slow, let your breath follow the waves. You may begin to feel the tide within you, the slow return, the quiet departure, the peaceful rhythm. This is not imagination, this is remembrance. You too are made of water, you too are listening, and in that listening you become part of the softest conversation in the world, one that has flowed since before there were voices, one that will continue long after we are gone. The ocean will keep whispering, and the sky will keep answering, and the tide will keep rising and falling, always on time, always with love. If the earth could breathe, its lungs would be the ocean, and every tide, every swell, every drifting current would be a part of that slow, steady breath. Inhale, exhale, not in the way we know it, fast and shallow, but deep and ancient. The sea does not gasp, it says. Its rhythms are slower than ours, its patterns older than our memories, and yet it breathes just the same. With every rise of water toward the shore, the earth draws something in. With every gentle retreat, it lets something go. It's a breath made of gravity and light, of salt and silence, and it has been going on since the beginning. This breath is not limited to the surface. The entire ocean moves with it, from the sunlit shallows to the shadowed trenches miles below. In one part of the world, warm water rises and spreads, like air expanding in a lung. In another, cold water sinks and settles, like an exhale slipping down. This circulation isn't just motion, it's memory. Water carries heat and oxygen and salt, but it also carries stories. It carries the touch of sunlight, the trace of polar ice, the weight of distant rivers. It carries life, and as it travels, it shares. The sea breathes not just for itself, but for the entire planet. In the tropics, the sun presses warmth into the surface, causing water to rise in temperature and expand. It becomes lighter, more active. It begins to move outward, flowing toward the poles. This movement is invisible from above, but it is the beginning of the breath. It's the start of a long journey that will take this warm water around the world. As it travels, it cools, it gives its heat to the air, and when it reaches the colder regions of the earth, it sinks. Heavier now, denser, colder, it descends to the ocean's floor. This is the exhale, the slow release, the beginning of another cycle. In these polar regions, something special happens. As sea ice forms, it pushes out salt, making the surrounding water even saltier and heavier. This heavy water sinks even faster, slipping into the deep like a weightless stone. It flows along the bottom of the ocean, thousands of meters below the surface, moving south or north, depending on its origin. It does not race, it glides, steady, patient. It may take centuries to rise again, and yet it always does. Eventually it will return to the surface, warmed by the equator's light, ready to breathe again. This movement, this endless loop, is called the thermohaline circulation. Thermo for heat, haline for salt. Together they create a kind of bloodstream for the ocean, a current that flows not in rivers but in deep sprawling highways of water. It connects every ocean, touches every continent, balances every climate. Without it, heat would pile in the tropics, and the poles would freeze deeper still. Storms would grow fiercer, droughts longer. But because of this breath, the earth remains in balance. The ocean breathes and we breathe with it. Even at the surface, this breathing continues. Each wave that crashes is a tiny inhale. Each ripple that flows back is a quiet exhale. But more than that, the ocean actually exchanges gases with the sky. It pulls in carbon dioxide, it releases oxygen. Phytoplankton, tiny floating plants, live at the surface and take in light and carbon. In return, they give the world oxygen, much like the forests on land. The ocean becomes a breath for the atmosphere. And in return, the atmosphere shapes the sea. Heat, wind and air pressure dance across the surface, guiding waves, forming clouds, stirring currents. It's a dialogue made of air and water, of energy and calm. The coastlines feel this breath most deeply. Here, the tides arrive like lungs filling up. Water stretches into estuaries and bays, into marshes and coves. Life gathers in these edges. Crabs and fish, birds and grasses, all time their lives with the tides. When the water rises, it brings food and shelter. When it falls, it leaves space to rest and breathe. The shoreline is not a boundary. It is a bridge, a place where the breath of the ocean becomes visible. Even the land beneath the ocean feels this rhythm. The weight of tides and currents presses and lifts, presses and lifts. It may not be much, a few centimeters at most, but the earth notices. It responds, in some places. The seabed rises slightly with each low tide and sinks again when the water returns. It is the earth adjusting to the sea's breath, yielding where it must, firm where it can be. This motion is not chaotic. It is balanced. It is precise. Animals of the deep have learned to live within this breath. Not just fish and whales, but jellyfish that drift with currents, and microscopic creatures that ride the flows like leaves on a breeze. They do not resist. They travel with the water, rising as it rises, sinking as it sinks. They have no need for speed. They are carried, cradled, moved by a force they do not question. Their world is not one of direction, but of rhythm. They live in the pulse of the ocean and through it, in the breath of the earth. We often forget that the ocean is not separate from the air or the land or even from us. We treat it as a thing apart. But it is not. It is the great connector. The ocean touches every continent. It fuels every weather pattern. It feeds the clouds that become rain, the rivers that become lakes, the ice that becomes drinking water. It carries the memory of the world in its waves. And it breathes, not like we do, but deeply, patiently, fully. So the next time you stand at the edge of the sea, close your eyes, listen, breathe with it. Feel the slow inhale as the tide creeps forward. Feel the quiet exhale as it slips away. Let it remind you that the earth is not silent, it is breathing, always breathing, and we are held within that breath. The slow breath of the earth does not end at the shoreline. It stretches far beyond into the very heart of the sea's interior, where time slows and movement becomes something more like memory. In these deep currents, the inhale and exhale of the ocean continue their gentle rhythm, sculpting the invisible pathways that water follows across centuries. These paths are not carved in rock, but in pressure, in salt, in the tender difference between warmth and cold. And it is here in this quiet realm that the ocean carries not only life but the pulse of the entire planet. Deep below, where the sun's light has never touched, the ocean holds its breath for a little longer. Cold, dense water slides across the seafloor, moved by forces that never rest. This deep current does not rush. It glides beneath the surface world, unseen but always present. It connects the polar oceans to the tropics, the Atlantic to the Pacific, the surface to the floor. It is the slow exhale of the earth, releasing the stories that have gathered in the dark. Oxygen, carried from the surface, feeds the creatures of the deep. Nutrients from decayed life above are drawn into the current and shared across continents. It is a redistribution not of wealth, but of balance. And balance is everything. When warm water rises in one part of the world, cold water must rise elsewhere to replace it. When salt increases in one current, it shifts another. The sea is a fluid system, and every change is a breath. Even the melting of glaciers and the rise of fresh water into the sea alters this rhythm. Less salt means lighter water. Lighter water changes how deeply the breath can sink. The lungs of the planet, though vast, are delicate, and they remember everything. There are places on Earth where the ocean breathes in so deeply that its waters sink for 1,000 years. Once drawn into the abyss, they move slowly across the bottom of the Atlantic, past the tips of Africa and South America, slipping under the Indian Ocean, then crawling through the Southern Ocean, and at last rising again in the Pacific. Along the way, these waters touch hydrothermal vents, where heat and minerals from beneath the crust infuse them with new life. These vents are like the ocean's hidden lungs, exhaling warmth into the deep. Life gathers around them, strange, glowing, resilient, feeding on chemical energy instead of sunlight. They too are part of the breath. But the ocean does not only breathe in darkness. At the surface, sunlight still fuels a different kind of exhale. When phytoplankton bloom, they transform carbon into oxygen, floating in giant clouds visible from space. These tiny beings form the base of the marine food web, but more than that, they clean the air we breathe. Nearly half the oxygen on Earth comes from the sea. Every other breath we take is born in water. The ocean breathes out and we breathe in. And though we may not feel it, this exchange ties us to the tide. Along coastlines, the breath becomes visible. When the tide rises, it floods mangroves, nourishes coral reefs, and fills salt marshes with life. When it falls, it leaves behind pools where tiny fish hide and birds come to feed. These shallow waters are the Earth's resting lungs, pausing between inhales and exhales. They shelter young sea life, filter water, trap carbon. They are the quiet chambers where breath becomes renewal, and they rise and fall not in chaos, but in time with the moon, in harmony with the sun, in rhythm with the turning of the earth. Wind, too, stirs the breath. It doesn't just move waves, it brushes the ocean's surface, helping mix the layers, nudging warm water away from coasts, allowing colder, deeper water to rise. This process, upwelling, brings nutrients to the surface, feeding fish and birds and whales. It is like the ocean drawing in a long, deep breath of memory, surfacing what was hidden and offering it back to life. Upwelling zones are some of the most vibrant ecosystems on the planet, not because they are warm or shallow, but because the ocean is breathing deeply there. Even during storms, the ocean keeps breathing. A hurricane may churn the surface into a frenzy, but below that chaos, the rhythm remains. The breath does not stop. The deep current flows. The tide moves forward and back, and after the wind has passed and the sky clears again, the sea settles back into its pattern. It does not forget. It returns to its pace or to its pulse, to the path it has followed for billions of years. The breath of the ocean is also a keeper of time. Inside the deep currents are chemical traces, carbon from ancient forests, isotopes from volcanic ash, signatures of life long gone. These are not merely scientific facts. They are footprints in the water. They tell us where the ocean has been, what it has seen, how it has changed, and still it breathes, it adapts, it continues. We are not separate from this breath. Every drop of water that falls as rain, every flake of snow, every sip from a river is part of this system. What we do to the land, we do to the sea. And what we do to the sea, we do to ourselves. For if the ocean forgets how to breathe, if the warmth becomes too strong, if the salt is lost, if the balance tips, then the breath slows. And when the earth breathes with struggle, all life listens, but there is still time. The ocean is not fragile. It is resilient. It remembers how to breathe even when it has been silenced. It remembers how to carry warmth and life, and most of all, it remembers how to respond slowly, fully, patiently. All we need to do is listen, to watch the tide come in and go out, to feel the wind and the wave, to remember that our breath is not separate from the earth's. For the ocean's slow breath continues beneath every boat, beneath every cloud, beneath every shore. It inhales light, it exhales life, and in its rhythm we are held. When the sea rises once more to touch the shore, it is not just a wave arriving, it is the return of breath, the continuation of a rhythm that never ceased. To those standing on the edge of the land, it may seem like only water coming and going, but it is more. It is the soft continuation of something older than speech, a motion that has shaped coastlines, carved cliffs, nourished roots, and guided migrations for millennia. This breath of the earth is not a background event. It is central. It is the pulse of the world made liquid and vast. In the early morning hours, as dew collects and light stretches slowly across the sea, the tide moves as it always has, out, then in. People build their lives along these boundaries, measuring time by the height of water, harvesting with the low, anchoring with the high. But while humans come and go, building harbours and laying stones, the ocean keeps its breath. Even when boats are gone and the beach is empty, it rises, it falls, carries weight, salt, life and memory without pause. This breath is not loud, but it is strong. It lifts massive swells across open oceans and then lets them break gently upon a quiet beach. It carries warm water across the globe, letting it release its heat into the air before sinking again into the cold. It gathers oxygen from the sky and carries it down to creatures in the dark. It moves nutrients up from the deep so that plankton can bloom and fish can feed. Every part of it is movement with purpose, every breath a complete cycle. Some of this breath is ancient. In the deepest places of the ocean, there are waters that have not seen the surface in hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. They sank long ago, cold and full of salt, and have been gliding slowly along the ocean floor ever since. These are old breaths, long inhales that have not yet risen to the light. When they do finally, it will be into a different world, a different sky, a changed planet. And still the ocean remembers how to move, still it will breathe. As the ocean breathes out, it gives, it cools the air, balances the carbon, feeds the cloud wall. As it breathes in, it receives. It takes in what falls from the sky, rain, warmth, dust, sunlight, and it transforms it. Inside the sea, everything is recycled. What dies becomes food, what sinks becomes foundation, what warms becomes motion. Even trash and toxins, though damaging, are carried by this breath, redistributed, softened, stored. The ocean does not resist what comes, it only seeks balance. There are times when that balance falters, when the breath grows shallow, when warm water lingers too long on the surface and prevents cooler water from rising, when oxygen runs low in deeper layers, when life below begins to strain under the weight of change. These are signs that the breath is not lost, but interrupted. The ocean does not forget how to breathe. It simply needs time and space to restore its rhythm. It asks not for silence, but for understanding. For us to listen, as it has listened for so long. And we can listen, by watching the tides, by respecting the reefs, by allowing wetlands to breathe with the sea. These are not small acts, they are part of the Earth's breathing space. Coral reefs, for example, rely on the gentle rise and fall of water to feed and clean themselves. Mangroves stretch their roots into the tide, filtering salt, catching sediment, storing carbon. Salt marshes, estuaries, and kelp forests all sway with the ocean's breath, living and dying by its pulse. Even whales, massive, ancient travellers, follow the currents shaped by this breath. They migrate with it, give birth in its warmth, dive into its depths, feeding and singing and in time with its movement. Their songs echo through the water, carried on waves that rise and fall with the sea's slow exhale. The ocean does not simply carry life, it sets the tempo for it. It tells the creatures of the world when to move, where to rest, how to return. To live in tune with this breath is not to slow down completely, but to recognize that not all life moves quickly, that some things must rise slowly, fall gently, stretch far before they return. The ocean does not rush to rise. It does not force the tide. It allows each part of its motion to unfold in time, and from this rhythm we can learn. We can learn to wait, to listen, to breathe not only for ourselves but with the world around us. At the end of each day, when the sun dips low and the sky glows with the soft colours of dusk, the sea breathes again. A high tide rises beneath the moonlight, reaching into harbours, slipping past jetties, whispering along the edges of piers. It does not speak loudly, but its presence is clear. It is there in the lapping sound against the rocks. It is there in the rhythm of the birds returning to shore. It is there in the soft, salt-sweet air that moves inland with the breeze. And so the earth continues, breathing through its oceans quietly, completely. Inhale, exhale, a motion so large it wraps around the globe, and yet so gentle we often miss it. But it is always there in the tides that come and go, in the currents that drift unseen, in the surface winds and the distant waves. It is there in the way water rises to the clouds and falls back down to fill the sea. It is there in the stories of the deep, in the warmth of the equator, in the chill of the poles. The ocean breathes, and because it breathes, we live. If you were to strip away the water from the oceans, to peel it back like a quiet curtain, you would see a world that almost no one has seen, a world not carved by hands but by gravity. Mountains taller than anything on land, valleys deeper than any known canyon, ridges that stretch across the globe like the seams of an ancient shell. All of it silent, all of it shaped not by movement but by stillness. For in the deep, gravity is not only a pull, it is an artist. It paints not with brush or pen but with pressure and time, sculpting the very bones of the planet beneath the miles of saltwater weight. This world is still not because it is lifeless, but because its movement is slow, deliberate, and hidden. It shifts over millennia, responding to forces we cannot see and changes we cannot rush. The floor of the ocean is a place where gravity whispers rather than shouts. Sediment falls grain by grain. Currents drift like sleepwalkers. The weight of the sea above presses everything downward, and in that downward push the earth reshapes itself. It caves and crumbles, it swells and sags. Nothing escapes gravity's slow hand, not even stone. Mid-ocean ridges rise from the seafloor like long submerged mountain chains. They mark the places where tectonic plates drift apart, where the earth makes new crust from molten rock. As lava spills and cools, gravity takes hold, pressing it into shape, holding it firm. These ridges run for tens of thousands of kilometers, stretching like a hidden spine beneath the sea. They are places of quiet creation, where the planet breathes out new land in complete darkness. And every inch of it is guided by the pull of gravity, by the downward motion of weight, by the constant shaping of stillness. In other places, deep trenches slice into the earth like ancient scars. The Mariana Trench, the deepest of them all, drops over 11 kilometers beneath the surface. To enter it is to fall through layers of pressure so immense they would crush anything unprepared. And yet, there is life. Microbes, strange fish, soft-bodied creatures that move slowly, elegantly, as if gravity has taught them the art of silence. These trenches are not places of chaos. They are places of balance, where gravity has pulled the world downward and then held it there, unmoving, unchanging for ages. But gravity doesn't only shape the large, it also defines the small. The way sand settles after a storm, the way silt drapes across a ledge, the way organic matter sinks in long spirals, slow as snowfall, until it becomes part of the ocean's memory. Over time, these layers grow into stories. Fossilized shells, thin bands of clay, traces of ancient plankton. The stillness becomes a kind of writing, a diary pressed into the floor of the sea. Gravity is the hand that holds the pen. Even the ocean's quietest spaces, those flat, featureless plains between ridges and trenches, are not truly flat. They are gently shaped, folded by the weight of time. Here, water settles and rests. Dust from the air, minerals from the rivers, tiny bits of space rock, all of it falls through the water column, pulled by gravity, to gather on these plains. No sound reaches here, no light, and yet the surface continues to change, moulded by the softest of forces, by the smallest of shifts. It is a place of true stillness, where gravity paints with patience. Above these depths, gravity also holds the ocean itself in place. The water conforms to the planet's shape, gathering in basins, flowing along continental shelves, spreading thin where the Earth swells beneath it. The ocean is not flat. It follows the geoid, a shape defined not by perfection, but by mass. Where the Earth is denser, the ocean surface rises ever so slightly. Where it is lighter, it falls. Satellites measure these differences. Maps reveal oceanic hills and valleys that our eyes cannot see. All of it, every rise and fall, is a portrait of gravity's design. The creatures of the deep are not immune to this shaping. Their bodies are built for it. Some have soft skeletons, others none at all. Some are gelatinous, almost invisible, so that they yield rather than resist the pressure. Many glow not because gravity demands it, but because light has no place in these shaped stillnesses. Their luminescence is a kind of song, a way of saying, I am here, in a world too silent for voices. They move with grace not because they were taught, but because the deep only allows grace to survive. Shipwrecks too fall into this stillness. They sink slowly and completely, becoming part of the landscape. Over time they are covered in silt, colonized by coral forgotten by the world above. Gravity pulls them down and then lets time take over. Rust replaces paint. Barnacles find homes. Fish make shelter. What was once machinery becomes reef. What was once motion becomes rest. And still the shape of the seafloor accepts it, adapts to it, absorbs it into the design. This is the great quiet of the ocean floor, not empty, not idle, but slow and certain. The kind of stillness that only gravity can maintain. A stillness that is not the absence of life, but the fullness of balance. A stillness that tells us that motion is not the only way to shape the world. That pressure and patience can carve as surely as rivers and wind. If you could lie on the ocean floor and wait, not for minutes or hours, but for years, you would feel the world shifting beneath you. Not wildly, not suddenly, but with the soft strength of stone remembering its form. You would feel the earth holding you. You would feel the weight of water above, not as a burden, but as a blanket. And in that stillness, you would know that even silence has shape, that even darkness has design. Because the seafloor is not just a place, it is a memory, it is the sketchbook of gravity, and it is always, always being drawn. Far beneath the crashing waves and shifting winds, there exists a world where movement is so slow it might be mistaken for stillness. But stillness is not the absence of motion. It is a different kind of motion. In the deeps of some sea, gravity shapes everything in ways so patient, so consistent that its changes are rarely noticed in a single lifetime. Here, the weight of the ocean above presses down with a constant, unrelenting calm. And in that pressure, the earth is moulded not by chaos, but by repetition. Every grain of sediment, every drifting shell, every sunken stone is guided into place by a force that never rests. In this quiet place, water does not swirl or crash. It creeps, it folds. It carries with it stories from other corners of the globe. The thermohaline circulation, the great conveyor belt of the ocean, passes through here, not with speed, but with purpose. Cold, salty water from the poles glides silently across the seafloor, slowly tracing the shape gravity has made. It hugs ridges, spills over underwater cliffs, and gathers in trenches. The shape of the deep guides the water, and the water in turn wears down the stone, not quickly, not violently, but with the persistence of a breath held for centuries. Each movement leaves behind something small, a whisper of calcium, a dusting of volcanic ash, a forgotten scale. These settle into layers, pressed gently by the weight above them. Layer after layer, they tell the story of time. Scientists drill into these sediments, pulling up cores that read like pages from a history no one witnessed but everyone is a part of. The warm periods, the ice ages, the extinctions, the bloom of life, it's all there in stones beneath the weight of the sea. And through it all, gravity has kept the pages from drifting. In certain places, underwater lakes and brine pools collect like secrets in the folds of the earth. These pockets are denser than the sea itself, so heavy with salt that they form a second surface within the ocean. Gravity holds them into place as if saying, this stays here. And so it does. These places seem otherworldly, with currents that ripple not in the open water but in these dense sunken basins. Life exists here too, adapted, delicate, luminous, living in the pockets gravity has carved. Hydrothermal vents rise from the ocean floor like chimneys from a sunken city, spewing warmth and minerals into the cold dark. Around them, strange creatures thrive, feeding not on sunlight but on chemical reactions. These vents form along the edges of tectonic plates, where Earth's crust cracks open and heat escapes. Gravity ensures that even here, structure is maintained. The rising plumes spread upwards until the surrounding water, heavier and colder, gently pushes them back. Nothing in the deep escapes gravity's attention. It is the quiet architect behind every drift and every boundary. Even sound moves differently here. In the deep ocean, where pressure is high and temperatures are low, sound travels farther and faster. It follows the contours of the sea floor, bending with the shape of the world. Submarines and whales know this. They use the deep sound channel to send messages over vast distances, their voices carried through layers of water shaped by gravity's hand. In this way, even communication is sculpted by the sea's invisible weight. The creatures that call this stillness home are sculpted too. Some are flat, so gravity presses on them evenly. Others are long and narrow, built to glide just above the sediment. Their movements are careful, deliberate, shaped by the need to conserve energy in a place where food is rare and distance is vast. Their bodies are soft where they must be, sturdy where they need to be. And in all of them, you can see the shape gravity has drawn, a blueprint for survival in the deepest parts of the Earth. Shipwrecks that fall into this quiet world become monuments. Over time, they are claimed by the sea, their sharp edges softened, their metal painted with rust and coral. Gravity pulls them into the sediment, slowly burying their stories. Some remain visible for decades, others vanish completely, taken in by the sea's still embrace. They become part of the architecture, not as foreign objects, but as layers in the ever-growing canvas of the ocean floor. When earthquakes shift the seafloor, they do not destroy gravity's work. They reshape it. A slope might collapse, a trench might deepen. The change is sudden, but the response is slow. Gravity begins again, pulling sediment into the new hollow, guiding water into its new path. And in time, stillness returns, not the same as before, but just as quiet. The Earth breathes in shape, it exhales design. And always, gravity keeps its hand on the shoulder of the sea. Even the surface is affected. The bulges in the ocean, invisible to the eye but measurable by satellites, reflect the deep topography below. Sea level is not uniform. It rises over underwater mountains. It dips over oceanic valleys. The shape of the deep sculpts the shape above. What we see in the waves is only the reflection of what gravity has shaped far below. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: the stillness of the deep is not still at all. It is motion slowed into form. It is movement so ancient, so quiet, so consistent that it becomes shape. The valleys, the ridges, the sediment, the currents, the creatures, they are all part of gravity's ongoing art. The canvas may be dark, the strokes may be slow, but the masterpiece is always growing. So when you look out over the ocean and think of it as a surface, remember the world beneath. Remember that it is not empty, that every inch has been touched by gravity's hand, that every shadow hides a shape, that in the deepest, quietest places, the Earth is always at work, sculpting its story in stillness and letting the sea remember. If you could follow a single grain of sand as it sinks from the surface to the ocean floor, you would begin to understand the kind of time that shapes the deep. That grain, light at first, may take weeks to fall. It will pass through layers of warmth and cold, through drifting clouds of plankton, through still water and moving eddies, but it will keep going, drawn steadily downward, not by urgency, but by certainty. Gravity does not rush. It waits. It pulls gently, constantly, without rest. And in that gentle pull the grain finds its place, eventually joining the millions before it, resting in a layer that marks one more moment in the Earth's long, silent story. These layers are not just mud, they are memory. Each thin sheet of sediment pressed against the next contains the record of change. Volcanic ash from a distant eruption, fine dust blown from a desert half a world away, microscopic shells from creatures that lived for a day and then became part of the sea's quiet archive. Over centuries the layers pile up, a timeline written not in ink but in weight. Gravity is the pen, and stillness is the page. There are places where this stillness has built wonders. Abyssal plains, vast, flat stretches of ocean floor, are the calmest regions on Earth. They stretch for thousands of kilometers, covered in fine sediment shaped so slowly that no storm, no wave, can ever erase them. These plains are not empty. They are home to life that knows the value of stillness. Sea cucumbers drift across the surface, sifting for organic debris. Tiny worms burrow beneath, feeding on nutrients long fallen. Here everything is soft, slow, and shaped by gravity's endless patience. In some regions, methane seeps bubble from the seafloor, feeding entire ecosystems built around chemical energy. These places are strange and quiet, dim and heavy, yet they thrive. Clams, bacteria, tube worms, all live together in the absence of light, in the presence of pressure. Gravity holds the structure of these communities, guiding where the gas escapes, where sediment settles, where life can take hold. The shape of stillness here is not just geological, it is biological, it is lived. Even coral, which we often imagine in warm, shallow reefs, exists in the deep. Cold water corals cling to underwater ridges and seamounts, growing slowly in the darkness. Their forms are delicate, branching, beautiful, and though they may never see sunlight or air, they are shaped by the same rules. Gravity anchors their fragile skeletons. It controls the flow of food-rich currents that brush past. It determines how sediment settles around their base. These are the gardens of the deep, growing not in soil but in silence. And in every corner of this world the quiet is complete. Sound does not travel in sharp echoes. It moves like breath. Light does not reach these depths. It is replaced by bioluminescence, soft and fleeting. The pressure is immense, yet the structures remain. There is no hurry, yet things grow. There is no light, yet beauty exists. And through it all, gravity holds the design. On rare occasions, a landslide tumbles down an underwater slope, not with chaos, but with slow momentum. Sediment clouds rise and settle, reshaping the slope, smoothing the curve. Gravity doesn't panic, it waits. It waits for everything to settle, to resettle, to resume. And when it does, the shape that emerges is no less perfect than before. Just different, just new. The design continues. Above on the surface, we often forget that this stillness exists. We see waves, storms, ships, and fish. We count tides and measure currents. But beneath it all, the quiet foundation holds. It does not seek attention. It does not shift quickly. But it is there, always. And in a world that changes faster and louder each day, this unchanging depth becomes something sacred. A reminder that not all power needs to be visible, that not all movement needs to be fast. That shape can come from waiting, from yielding, from silence. There is poetry in knowing that the ocean floor has been sculpted not just by what moves, but by what rests, by the long, slow settling of things, by the passage of water over stone, by the fall of ash and shell and silt, by the invisible tug of gravity, painting not with colour but with form. It is art made in silence, sculpture formed by time, and we, though we live far above it, are part of that shape. The continents rest on tectonic plates that slide and shift. Those plates are pulled and pushed by forces deep below. Mountains rise, trenches deepen, earthquakes ripple upward, and still the sea returns to its rhythm. Still gravity draws every shape toward balance, toward rest. In the end, the ocean floor is not a place of nothing. It is a place of everything, just stretched across time. Its hills are not built in minutes. Its valleys are not formed in storms. They are the result of patience, of pressure, of the quiet voice of gravity whispering again and again. This way, just here, now wait. And so, the deepest places on Earth become the most peaceful. The darkest become the most stable. The stillest become the most complete. Because gravity never forgets. It never stops. It shapes without praise. It creates without applause. And in its silence, it builds a world that holds us all. That is the shape of stillness. That is what gravity paints in the deep. Each night when the moon rises and lays its pale light across the sea, something ancient begins to stir, not loudly, not suddenly, but with the softness of a sigh. The tides begin to shift again, answering a pull that is older than memory. The moon, high and distant, does not shout. It pulls gently, steadily, with a kind of patience that only the cosmos can know. and the ocean, vast and listening, responds. Water lifts toward the sky, not because it wants to fly, but because it is tied to the moon by invisible threads. These threads are not made of string or steel. They are made of gravity, of time, of silent influence. They are lunar threads, and they reach into every bay, every shore, every cell of water on Earth. The moon's gravity is gentle. Compared to the sun, it is small. Compared to Earth, it is distant. But gravity is not about size alone. It is about closeness and persistence. The moon circles our planet every 28 days, always watching, always pulling. On the side of the Earth that faces the moon, the ocean is drawn slightly outward, stretching toward its silver light. But something fascinating happens on the far side of the Earth too. There the water also rises, not toward the moon, but away from it. Because the Earth itself is being pulled slightly toward the moon, the water on the far side is left behind, bulging outward as if remembering its centre. Two high tides, too low. A rhythm tied not just to the moon's presence, but to its constant embrace. This tug is not abrupt. It does not tear or twist. It eases the ocean upward, holds it for a moment, then lets it fall again. The Earth spins beneath this pull, creating the illusion that the tide moves around the world, chasing the moon. But in truth, the water is responding to forces that don't come and go. They ebb and flow. The moon's threads are not pulled tight. They are flexible, stretching and relaxing, wrapping themselves around the planet like a soft net of motion. And everything they touch feels their influence. Even the land responds, though we cannot see it with our eyes. The solid Earth is not as solid as it seems. It rises and falls just a little, following the moon's gravity in what scientists call Earth tides. The ground lifts by centimetres, quietly without notice. Buildings and forests move with it, gently rising and sinking, in time with the sea. The whole planet is breathing in rhythm with the moon. In coastal towns, this rhythm is woven into daily life. Fishermen set their nets by the tide. Children build sandcastles with one eye on the water's edge. Docks are built to rise and fall, and still the moon watches, patient and pale. Its influence is everywhere, even where no ocean touches the land. Underground aquifers, hidden lakes, even the water in our bodies responds to its gravitational voice. It is as if we are all part of a great lunar loom, woven thread by thread into the fabric of tide and time, and the moon's pull does not act alone. The sun, larger and stronger, adds its own gravity to the pattern. When the moon and sun line up, during new moons and full moons, their combined pull creates stronger tides called spring tides, not named for the season, but for the way the water seems to spring forward. And when they are at right angles during the quarter moons, their pulls cancel each other slightly, and the tides are gentler. These are neap tides. The threads stretch and loosen, tighten and relax, always keeping time with the sky. In fjords and bays, where land narrows the sea, the moon's threads pull tighter. The water rushes in, climbs high, and then slips away, carving out shorelines and shaping the land. In places like the Bay of Fundy, the tides are among the highest in the world. Not because the moon pulls harder there, but because the shape of the land funnels the motion, amplifies the rise. It is like the thread is being drawn through a narrow eye, pulled in and out with extraordinary precision. But even in the open ocean, far from any coast, the moon's pull is felt. It guides the movement of large-scale currents, shaping the paths of gyres and influencing how water circulates across the globe. These are the broader threads, less visible but just as real. They keep the sea in balance, prevent stagnation, help transport heat from the equator to the poles, and they all begin with the soft, persistent hand of the moon. Even life itself has learned to follow the moon's lead. Coral reefs, those brilliant underwater cities, often spawn all at once, timed to the full moon. Fish and crabs, birds and turtles, all follow lunar calendars. Some sea creatures rise to the surface only when moonlight touches the waves. Others hide when the moon is full, avoiding predators in the glow. The threads of gravity are not just physical, they are biological, wrapped into instinct, into DNA, into the pulse of living things. And perhaps most beautifully, the moon does all this without a sound. It does not shout its presence. It does not demand attention. It simply is. And because it is, the ocean moves. The earth leans. Life listens. There is a kind of elegance in that. A quiet leadership, a persistent touch that asks nothing and yet shapes everything. These lunar threads are not limited by borders or beliefs. They reach from the coldest Arctic waters to the warmest tropical seas. They pass through time zones and cultures, touching every coast, every creature. They are reminders that something so far away can still matter deeply, that what pulls on the sea also pulls on us, that gravity, though invisible, is never absent. So the next time you see the moon rising, imagine its threads stretching gently across the sky, slipping into the water, wrapping around the world. Imagine the ocean listening, imagine the earth leaning, and imagine yourself as part of that motion, held, lifted, and returned by a force that has always been there. That is how the moon pulls at every shore, not with force but with faith, not with weight but with presence. And the sea in all its vastness responds like a harp touched by light. The moon's pull is not a command but a suggestion, a steady gesture that invites motion, and the earth answers in its own language. In the oceans, that language is the tide. But in the sky above, in the soil below, and in the lives that fill the space between, that invitation becomes rhythm. Birds fly with it, trees lean with it. The liquid in our cells responds to it. These lunar threads are not simple lines of force. They are part of a fabric that binds the planet together. They do not twist or bind. They flow. They wrap through time like strands of music, shaping not just water, but memory. If you travel along the shore during a full moon, you might notice the tide rising higher than usual. It comes quietly, without warning, and yet right on time. The water slips past its usual mark on the rocks. It floods into pools where dry sand usually lies. And then, just as gently, it retreats. The moon has moved slightly, the earth has spun, and the tide lets go. This gentle give and take is not a mistake. It is the natural ebb of the moon's gravity, a signal sent across space and felt in the rhythm of water touching stone. But even more fascinating is how this pull is felt beyond the visible tide. In the deep ocean, hundreds of meters below the surface, the moon's influence can still be measured. Internal tides, waves hidden far beneath the surface, rise and fall in sync with lunar motion. These waves are not shaped by wind or weather, but by the stretch and flex of gravity within the ocean's layers. They move heat, stir nutrients, and shape the behavior of creatures that never see the surface. Even in darkness, the moon reaches them. And not just creatures. Entire ecosystems have aligned themselves to lunar timing. Along coral reefs, the spawning of corals is often synchronized to the full moon. Over just a few nights, millions of coral colonies release their eggs and sperm into the water, turning the sea cloudy with potential. This explosion of life is not random. It is the moon's whisper, translated into biology. The same lunar thread that lifts oceans also lifts life into motion. Other animals too follow these silent threads. Grunion, small silver fish, ride the waves onto sandy beaches only during high tides after full or new moons. There, under the moonlight, they lay their eggs in the wet sand, timing their ritual so the next tide will carry their offspring to sea. Sea turtles, emerging from the depths, climb ashore during certain moon phases to nest in places touched by the moon's light. These are not simple instincts. They are responses to an invisible rhythm, movements tied to threads no eye can see. In polar regions, where the moon's path lingers low over icy seas, the lunar pull creates tides beneath the frozen surface. These under-ice tides help break and shift sea ice, allowing light and nutrients to reach plankton that bloom even in the cold. The moon keeps time here too, though the water may never rise above the ice. It is not the height of the tide that matters. It is its presence, its persistence, its quiet continuation. Even people, long before telescopes or satellites, watched the moon's effect and built their lives around it. Farmers planted by its phases, sailors read its cycles like maps, poets spoke of its mystery, ancient temples aligned their stones to moonrises. In every culture, the moon's influence was more than scientific. It was spiritual, emotional, human. Something about its constant return, its gentle glow, its pull on the sea and self told people they were part of something greater. And they were right. Because what the moon does to the ocean, it does to us. The salt in our blood mirrors the sea. The water in our bodies moves with subtle rhythms. Some researchers have found correlations between lunar phases and sleep patterns, mood or behavior, not as hard rules but as soft echoes of the tide. We are not pulled by the moon like oceans, but perhaps we are stirred ever so slightly, like still water touched by a passing breeze. There is also wonder in knowing the moon is moving away. Slowly, about 3.8 centimeters each year, it drifts farther into space. This means that its pull on the tides is also slowly decreasing, and in the distant future, the tides will grow smaller. But the threads remain. The moon's departure is not a retreat. It is a dance. As it pulls on us, we pull on it, and the exchange stretches the bond. The Earth's rotation slows. The moon's orbit expands. It is a relationship, not a rule. This relationship is everywhere. In estuaries where salt meets fresh water, in bays that echo with the rise and fall of the tide, in the soft breathing of mangroves and marshes that bloom with every lunar cycle. In all these places, the moon's threads weave not only through the water, but through time, through form, through life. They stretch across the sea, holding it gently. They slip into the forests, into the skin of the earth, into the bones of whales and the paths of birds. And they touch us too, when we gaze at the moon and feel quiet, or when we walk a beach at night and sense the presence of something larger. The moon does not command. It invites. It reaches with invisible threads and waits for the earth to respond. And the earth does. Through tides, through rhythms, through silence and stillness and sway, through water that lifts and then falls and then lifts again. This is how the moon speaks, not in words but in motion, not in voice but in gravity. And every shore listens. Night after night the moon continues its watch, silent and sure, as if tethered to earth by more than just gravity. And in return the world below continues to move in gentle reply. The sea in its vast and ceaseless motion follows the curve of the moon's invisible hand. Shorelines shift, rivers swell, and the very shape of coastlines change across years and centuries. Yet none of this feels abrupt. It is change paced like breath, like thought, like the slow exhale of a planet in rhythm with the sky. Lunar threads hold everything together, not tightly, but with softness, with elegance, with patience. The moon's influence is not limited to oceans or tides. Its presence creates a balance between push and pull that helps stabilize Earth's tilt. This axial tilt, though it wobbles slightly over thousands of years, is kept relatively steady because of the moon. And that tilt is what gives Earth its seasons. Without the moon, the planet might wobble wildly, shifting climates too fast for life to adapt. In this way, the moon does not just pull the water, it helps hold the very balance of the world's habitability. Its threads stretch far beyond the coastlines. They reach into the air we breathe and the food we grow. In ocean basins, tidal energy moves not only water, but heat and nutrients. As the tide rises, it mixes the layers of the sea, stirring oxygen downward, lifting nutrients upward. This constant movement keeps waters from becoming stagnant. It keeps plankton blooming and fish migrating. And in certain places, like shallow straits and deep fjords, the effect is amplified, turning narrow passages into rivers of motion guided by lunar timing. Every cycle carves a little more shape into the underwater world, etching the memory of the moon's presence into the Earth's very surface. Humans have tried to capture this tidal energy. Along the coasts of places like France, Canada, and South Korea, tidal power plants now harness the moon's pull, turning gravitational sway into electricity. These plants do not burn fuel, they do not release smoke, they simply let the water move, and in that movement they draw power. It's a quiet energy, a borrowed strength, as if the moon has offered a small piece of its endless motion to help light the night. Still, the most powerful expression of the moon's touch is not in machines or maps, it is in feeling. There is something about standing under a full moon that slows the heart, something about walking along a moonlit beach that softens thought. We are not only made of water, we are moved by it, and the same force that pulls the tide pulls gently on the rhythms within us. Our breath, our blood, our dreams, all swayed just a little by the great silent orb above. In literature and art, the moon has always been a symbol of longing, of distance, of reflection. But in truth, it is not distant. It is bound to us. It does not drift away in disregard, but circles us faithfully, its threads never breaking. It is not unreachable. It is already here, in the water, in the waves, in the rising tide that touches our feet. It is both present and apart, and perhaps that is what makes it feel like magic. In places where the tide is extreme, like the coastal flats of Mont Saint-Michel in France, or the turbulent inlets of the Arctic, the moon's influence becomes almost theatrical. Water rushes in with speed, turning sand to sea in moments. Then, just hours later, the land reappears, glistening and silent. People have built homes and temples, docks and defences, all in tune with this motion. Cities have adapted to the moon's pull. History has moved with it. Wars were won and lost by the timing of tides. Explorers counted on its rhythm. Ancient calendars tracked its phases long before they marked years. And through all of this, the moon has never changed its voice. It does not demand applause. It offers its motion freely. Its threads do not force the sea to move. They give it permission. They provide a path. They say gently, this way, and the water listens. The idea that something so far away could have such influence is humbling. The fact that we cannot see these lunar threads, yet still feel their presence, is a reminder of the hidden structure beneath the world. A reminder that what we cannot touch may still shape everything we are. Children are born under full moons, storms gather by lunar tides, and coral spawns at the precise moment the moon tells it to. In these moments, the moon becomes more than a rock in space. It becomes a guide, a timekeeper, a companion. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the tide is high and the world is still, it is easy to believe that the moon has never left us, that it leans in just a little closer, that its threads are not only gravity, but memory and hope and light. Because in the end, the moon does not pull alone. It pulls us together, ocean to shore, night to day, past to future. In its silence, it keeps us in motion. In its distance, it keeps us close. These are the lunar threads, soft, invisible, eternal, and we are all gently held in their embrace. There are moments, rare and quiet, when the sea seems to rest. The waves soften into smooth undulations, the wind pulls back, and the surface becomes a mirror, reflecting the wide sky in still perfection. In these moments, it's as if the ocean is asleep, not gone, not empty, just calm. Yet even in this seeming stillness, something deeper is happening. Beneath the silence, the sea is moving in ways we cannot see, held in rhythm by gravity and memory, by the slow churn of mass and motion, and by the light of a distant moon that never looks away. To the untrained eye, this sleeping sea is without motion, but to those who listen closely, the lull is just another verse in a much longer symphony. Tides still rise, even if the surface stays smooth. Currents still flow, deep and slow. The moon still pulls. Gravity does not rest, and neither does the ocean. Instead, it moves in its own dream time, its energy lowered, but not gone. Just as we breathe more slowly in sleep, the ocean shifts into a quieter rhythm, one shaped not by storms or winds, but by the subtle pull of forces too large to touch and too gentle to feel. At the heart of this symphony is balance. Every molecule of water holds weight, and every movement, no matter how small, changes how that weight is distributed across the face of the earth. The tides, guided by the moon and the sun, lift water into places where it had not been before, and when it returns, it reshapes the land in whispers. This constant rearrangement of mass affects not only the ocean, but the earth itself. Satellites orbiting far above can detect tiny changes in Earth's shape as the water moves. A millimetre of rise in the sea here, a fraction of tilt in the land there, all part of the sea's soft, endless rearrangement. When the sea sleeps, these changes don't stop. They simply slow, like a deep breath drawn out over hours. It is in these moments that the tide's poetry becomes clearest. The moonlight on the water is more than reflection, it is conversation. The moon, hovering above, holds the ocean in its gaze, and the ocean, in turn, rises to meet it. Not in haste, not in noise, but in quiet longing. Each tide is an act of remembering, each swell is a reply, and while the surface rests, the deep remains in motion. Thermohaline currents, driven by temperature and salt, drift beneath the silence. These waters are cold, ancient, full of stories gathered from across the globe. They do not need wind to move. They are pulled by density, by the weight of molecules, by the press of cold, and always they are guided by the shape of the sea floor, the ridges, the trenches, the slow slopes that gravity has etched into the earth. These shapes are not just scenery, They are channels for flow, notes in the larger melody, structure for the sea's breath. Even above the surface, this stillness has meaning. The air becomes heavy with quiet. Seabirds circle lower. Boats drift more gently. Light spreads slowly across the horizon. Without waves to scatter it, sunlight glows more evenly. The world appears paused, but it is not. It is simply listening. Listening to the moon's pull, to the earth's spin, to the sea's deep hum. In this listening, everything feels clearer. The connection between sky and water is made visible. It's a moment when the fabric of things, space, time, mass, motion, can almost be felt. And in that silence, life continues. Fish do not stop swimming. Whales do not stop singing. But even their songs seem softer, more measured. Sea turtles may drift instead of paddle. Jellyfish float like clouds of memory. The coral reefs pulse slowly, opening and closing in time with the tide. Nothing is truly still. It is simply slowed, folded into a quieter verse of the ocean's eternal song. This sleep is not the absence of energy. It is energy at rest. And in rest, there is power. The power to gather, to reset, to remember. The ocean's stillness is not weakness. It is wisdom. A lesson written in waves and currents, in the soft hush of motion so smooth it can be mistaken for nothing at all. But that nothing is full. It holds weight. It holds shape. It holds story. Even the land feels it. When the sea is calm, it reveals its edges, tidal flats, sandbars, seaweed beds. These places, often hidden beneath water, stretch wide, catching the last light of day. Crabs scurry, birds pick through the wet soil. Life emerges carefully, briefly. The moon pulls, the sea breathes, the world leans in to watch. This is the sea asleep, not absent, but aware, dreaming in motion, listening in sense, responding not with noise, but with the slow grace of gravity made liquid. And though the stillness may not last, though the winds may return and the waves rise again, this moment matters. It reminds us that there is a rhythm even in quiet, that there is movement even in pause, that there is connection even when everything seems still. For the sea never truly sleeps. It rests, it resets, it waits. And while it does, the moon keeps watch. Gravity continues to hum, and all the while, beneath the calm, the tide prepares to rise again. Beneath the resting surface of the sea, the world moves in a way that doesn't seek attention. It doesn't crash or swirl or roar, it leans, it folds, it breathes. The ocean's sleep is not a slumber, but a still alertness, where motion becomes a form of memory, and silence holds the echoes of 1,000 currents. Even in this quiet, gravity is present, tugging gently at each layer of water, shaping it not with sudden force but with persistent touch. In this lull, the ocean leans into its own weight, and the planet listens. Far below, where sunlight no longer travels and pressure climbs like invisible stone, the deep currents continue their ancient path. They drift not because of the winds, but because of differences in temperature and salt. Cold, dense water formed near the poles begins a journey that may last centuries, sinking into trenches, coasting along the seafloor, slipping between underwater ridges. These motions are not felt above, but they are essential. They are the sea's deepest breath, the slowest movement in Earth's longest rhythm. This movement is a sleepwalk, steady, purposeful, unhurried. The stillness above is balanced by the flow below. Gravity does not rest, and the ocean does not forget. Each drop of water carries a memory, of warmth held at the surface, of minerals gathered from land, of life once floating in the light. As these drops sink into the deep, they take those memories with them, joining a flow that circles the globe, always pulled by the mass of the earth and the curvature of the seafloor. This circulation is the ocean's bloodstream, moving nutrients, balancing temperatures, connecting distant places in a slow, seamless loop. In the midwater, between the light and the dark, live creatures built for the quiet. Transparent fish that shimmer like ghosts, squid that drift with outstretched arms, jellyfish that pulse gently through the gloom. They are adapted not just for pressure and cold, but for stillness. They do not chase, they do not scatter. They follow the currents, not to escape, but to belong. In this sleeping sea they become part of the lullaby, each movement a note in a composition that only the deep can hear. The moon's influence continues even here. Its pull is not just felt on the surface, it shapes the entire column of water. As the moon tugs, the pressure changes, subtly shifting currents even thousands of meters down. Internal tides rise and fall in complete darkness, moving walls of water as high as mountains through the ocean's middle layers. These tides are not visible, not loud, not fast. They are gravity's softest instrument, playing the deepest harmonies. They mix waters that would otherwise stay separate, bringing nutrients to where life can reach them, sending oxygen to where it is needed most. Above, the sleeping sea reflects the sky like a lens. Moonlight rests upon it undisturbed. Stars shine more clearly in its glassy sheen. When a meteor falls, its light is doubled, once in the sky, once in the water. Boats drift with little resistance. Dolphins move slowly, staying just below the surface, as if not to wake the calm. It is in these moments, when noise fades, that the full connection between the sky and sea is revealed. One reflects the other, one holds the other. Gravity links them, and the earth becomes a bridge between. In shallow waters, the effects of this stillness are even more visible. Tidal pools settle, revealing creatures tucked into crevices, anemones closed tight like sleeping flowers, hermit crabs frozen mid-step, sea stars pressed against rock. They wait for the water's return, not in fear but in trust. The moon will pull again. The tide will rise. The rhythm is not broken, only paused. This is the sea's inhale before another exhale, a rest between verses. Salt marshes and mangrove forests benefit most from this silence. When the tide rests low, their roots breathe. When the tide lifts again, they are nourished. These ecosystems are timed to the moon's lull. They grow not in spite of the stillness, but because of it. They need the rhythm. They thrive in the cycle. Without it, the balance would falter. But here, in this harmony of gravity and light, of motion and rest, life continues with confidence. Even time feels different when the sea is calm. It stretches, not like a line, but like a circle, repeating, wrapping, returning. The stillness is not emptiness. It is a full pause, like the space between heartbeats. It is where awareness grows, where listening deepens, where movement becomes more meaningful because it has stopped. The sleeping sea reminds us that activity is not always action, that rest is not always retreat, that stillness can hold more than sound. In these rare moments, the ocean becomes a teacher. It shows us that there is power in quiet, strength in pause, beauty in waiting, that the earth does not need to roar to be alive, that mass and motion are not separate from light and silence, they are part of the same symphony, that moonlight on water, a breath in the dark, the hush of waves resting, all these things are connected by the invisible structure of gravity. And so the sea sleeps. But its sleep is not without purpose, it is not empty or idle. It is a moment of renewal, of balance, of invisible choreography. The moon watches, the earth turns, the water listens, and even as it rests, the ocean prepares for its next rising, its next reply. The sleep is soft, but the song continues. Eventually the stillness begins to change. It does not break with suddenness. It unfolds like a yawn, like a stretch after rest. The ocean, having gathered itself in silence, begins to move once more. The tide stirs. A breeze dances across the surface. The glassy water gives way to ripples. These first signs are quiet, softer than a whisper, but they carry the weight of return. Gravity, which never ceased its pull, draws the water upward again. The moon, still watching, still pulling, leans slightly further, and the sea responds. This is how the sleep ends, not with an alarm, but with a gentle call back to motion. As the tide begins to rise, life returns to its rhythm. In tidal flats, the first fingers of water stretch across the sand, wrapping around scattered shells and seaweed. Crabs emerge from their hiding places. Shorebirds gather at the edge, waiting for the shallows to refill with prey. Tiny fish dart into the returning tide, carried forward by something ancient, something automatic. The sea is waking, not in a rush, but in the continuation of its eternal breath. Beneath the surface, currents begin to shift. Slowly at first, then with growing intention, they resume their global path. Warm water begins to climb again in the tropics, and cold, nutrient-rich water rises in its place along the coasts. This upwelling feeds entire ecosystems, bringing with it the memory of the deep, a long-held story of minerals, salt, and silence. Coral reefs begin to pulse with life, stirred by the touch of moving water. Plankton bloom, glowing with sunlight carried down by the sea's transparent arms. The ocean is not merely moving, it is returning to speech. This new motion is not separated from the sleep, it is born from it. The stillness gave the sea time to settle, to reset, to remember the threads that hold it. And now, in motion, those threads stretch again, reaching across continents, carrying the moon's message from one shore to the next. In bays and inlets, water rises along stone walls. In fjords, tides flow like rivers, reshaping the land. And in the open sea, swells begin their long journey across the world, gentle at first, then stronger. These waves are not a storm's doing. They are the sea's stretch after sleep. Even in the deep, the shift is felt. The slow, massive rivers of the abyss pick up speed by fractions, responding to the subtle changes in surface pressure. Sediment begins to move again, ever so slightly. The heavy particles that had rested are lifted and guided into new positions. This is gravity continuing its quiet sculpting, shifting the canvas with every breath. The floor of the ocean changes, not dramatically, but certainly. The world below does not stay still. It only moves in ways that take longer to see. Above, the moon begins its next phase, waxing or waning. Its face shifts in the sky, but its pull remains. And as the tides follow this lunar path, the patterns repeat, not as copies but as echoes. No tide is identical to the last. No wave falls on the same stone in quite the same way. And yet there is a reliability here, a trust. The moon will pull, the sea will rise, the earth will turn. This is the song of time measured not in seconds but in motion. For creatures of the sea, this rhythm is more than background, it is instruction. Fish that spawn only during specific tides begin to gather. Seaweed releases spores in sync with the return of motion. Whales, following their migratory routes, feel the shift and begin to move again. Even human communities notice the change. Fishermen return to their boats, children come back to the beaches, and those who walk along the shore feel it, the return of something large, something calm, something that moves without needing to explain itself. This waking is not about speed, it is about presence. The sea does not rush into motion, it returns with grace, it reintroduces itself with each rising tide. It reminds the land, the sky, the life it touches, that it is here, that it has always been here, that even in stillness it never truly left. And just as the tide rises, it will fall again. Just as the sea wakes, it will one day rest. The cycle is not a loop but a spiral, always turning, always progressing, always leading back to the beginning but slightly changed. This is not repetition. This is deep rhythm. This is Earth's breath. So when you stand by the sea and feel the tide coming in, remember that you are witnessing the end of a sleep and the beginning of another verse in a song older than the land itself. You are part of the weight and the motion, of the moon and the memory, of the gravity that binds everything together. You are part of the tide even when you do not see it. You are moved even when you are still. Because the sea sleeps, but it does not stop. It wakes, but it does not rush. It follows the pull of a moon that never looks away, and in doing so it reminds us that motion and rest are not opposites, but companions. When the sea sleeps, it is not the end of the song. It is the rest between notes, the silence that makes the sound more meaningful, and when it wakes, the world begins again.